What's going on, my friend? It's Jeff Newport from ChasingStrength.com. And in today's video, we are going to answer the question, what is hybrid O-lifting? And why is it, or is it even the best way for men over 40 to train? Now, here's a little background on the question, okay, or questions. As a competitive Olympic lifter and college strength and conditioning coach, I was routinely frustrated by my athletes who could not perform barbell power cleans, okay? I mean, they weren't frustrating me. The situations and circumstances were frustrating me. And that's because most of these guys had tight shoulders, tight lats, tight wrists from way too much benching and not enough restoration work. Now, this was back in the mid to late 90s when restoration work was practically unheard of, right? It wasn't a thing like it is today. So the barbell cleans, well, they became barbell clean pulls or barbell high pulls, whatever you want to call them, or even dumbbell cleans. Plus, the reality is doing higher reps, anything more than 5 reps with the Olympic lifts practically guarantees your technique falls apart, right? Just flush it down the toilet. It's not gonna remain intact. And that's a great setup for injury. And no one wants one of those, okay? Especially not an athlete in the middle of season or preseason, right? Trying to prepare for competition. Now, it's funny. I don't know if this is funny, but this was the reality, right? I remember seeing what was called the kettle stack, which was essentially a handle with a V on it like this. We'll see if we can get a picture, and a screw underneath it like a bolt in the back of a Muscle and Fitness magazine. Okay. And it was plate loaded. Okay. It was the closest thing to a kettlebell I had ever seen. And I thought, man, this would be great to use with my athletes. So I made a mental note to investigate further, right? We couldn't afford, we didn't have the luxury of being able to have spare cash at Rutgers at that time for incidental pieces of equipment like that. So we had to do without. So as I said, I made a mental note. I think I just said this. I made a mental note to investigate further. And so when I transitioned from college strength coach to personal training business owner, I ran into essentially the same issue. And that is teaching the Olympic lifts, or the O lifts, as some like to call them, was a juice that just wasn't worth the squeeze, right? It's too technical, and clients had to suspend their disbelief, right? I had to ask them to buy into the fact that taking the time to learn the technique would pay off in the long run in making them stronger and leaner, right, and better conditioned. And that was just not a fight worth having in many cases. So went back to the dumbbell version of the Olympic lifts. And then I saw the Dragon Door ad for kettlebells in 2001, and I bought my first set of kettlebells in January of 2002. Man, it's a long time ago. And I started using them with my clients shortly thereafter, right? And we all just love them for their short, effective brutality. Higher rep versions of the Olympic lifts did wonders for people's physiques, right? They got leaner, stronger, faster. And not only did they get stronger, but they got more flexible and they got better conditioned. Plus, the kettlebell training, right, was hard. And so my clients became mentally engaged. They couldn't just check out and go through the motions like so many people do when they're working out / training, right? So what's just an interesting side note, one of those clients, as I film this, it's the middle of 2025. She and I started training together in 2001, and we're still training together today. Now, like me, she's in her 50s. The 16 kilogram, it's a toy for her, right? And the 24 kilo routinely goes over her head. It just cracks me up, right? 50-something-year-old woman routinely putting a 24 kilo kettlebell over her head. Thus shows the power of consistency, right? So speaking of consistency, back in the early 2010s, I wrote a lot about Olympic lifters' physiques, primarily coming from snatches, cleans, overhead work, squats, and pulls. And now other people are starting to talk about that too, right? Now, I know somebody's going to chime in here and say, yeah, man, but the Chinese, they're some of the most muscular dudes in the world, some of the most muscular weightlifters, and they do bodybuilding. And you know what? You are right, my friend. You are. They do. They do some bodybuilding. At least one credible source says they do about 6 sets of 10 per body part, depending on the day, depending on the workout, after all their major lifts are completed, right? Now, some people are going to say, see, I told you they didn't get all their muscles from just doing the O lifts. And I'll say, yeah, again, you're right. They didn't. Okay, as I just said, 6 sets of 10, right? Bodybuilding exercises. But what you don't know is they did get most of it from their Olympic lifting assistance exercises and the Olympic lifts. And somebody might chime in and go, oh yeah, how can you be so sure? Because that's where I got most of mine from. I grew up to 252 pounds from 165 pounds on a heavy diet of squats, Olympic lifters do a lot of squats, deadlifts, which is a form of a pull, right? Like clean pulls, snatch pulls, presses, okay, overhead work, bench presses, rows, cleans, power shrugs, again, up until the age of 22. Then I dieted down from 252 to about 200 pounds, and I still kept the squats, only this time they were deeper, and there were a lot more of them. Plus, I did a lot more pulls and a lot more overhead work. The truth is, nothing blows up your back faster than snatch grip high pulls from above the knee. And nothing blows up your muscularity faster than high frequency squats. Total body growth, okay, not just the legs. So, and that using that methodology is how I went from 200 back up to 230 in my late 20s. So if your goal is to transform the way you look, feel, and perform, you cannot go wrong by using the hybrid variations of the Olympic lifts found inside the kettlebell exercises, especially the double kettlebell exercises, which I found over the last 20 plus years is where much of your transformation will come from, okay? And what kind of exercises are you talking about? What kind of double kettlebell exercises? Well, let's put a list up here on the screen so you can take a look at them. We're talking about exercises, and these are all doubles, okay? So the clean, the press, the push press, the jerk, the front squat, the clean and press, the clean and push press, the clean and jerk, the high pull, and the snatch. Why is that? Well, because they're just so demanding on your body. Your body literally cannot resist changing when you use these exercises routinely. How do you get started? Well, you get started right with one or two, a handful. You learn the techniques. You build your strength first. Then you focus on growing muscle. That's done with specific rep ranges, okay? And in almost every case, your conditioning and your fat loss will just happen as a result of doing those two things. And one of the best parts, you can practically work all the muscles in your body at once. So there's no need for doing assistance exercises. Now, look, as an aside, let me tell you, you have not lived until you experience the bicep soreness you get the next day after a higher repetition, snatches, and cleans, okay, with doubles, right? Plus, look, let's face it, not all of us have the time to lift twice a day, 2 to 3 hours at a pop like the Chinese, right? So the double kettlebell lifts, they're super time efficient. You can accomplish a lot of work in just 20 minutes if you know how to structure your training program correctly, all right? So speaking of, if you need some resources in your hybrid Olympic lifting double kettlebell journey, I'll leave some in the description below this video. The first will show you the fastest way to learn and master the double kettlebell lifts using my technique stacking methodology. The second is a Recomp or recomposition program. That's where you get stronger, build some muscle, strip off some body fat, improve your conditioning simultaneously, all in the same training block. And the third is a series of programs for the advanced kettlebell lifter who craves or thrives on challenges, okay? So look, at the end of the day, if you're interested in staying healthy and strong in your 40s and your 50s and your 60s and for the rest of your life, in my opinion and in my experience, going on 32 years now in the field, there's no better investment than kettlebell training, especially double kettlebell training. So if you found this video helpful, click the like button, smash the subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber, and share it with a friend you know needs to get back in shape, who's over 40, 50, 60, so on, all right? And finally, leave me a comment in the comment section below. What's your experience been with the double kettlebell exercises, with the hybrid Olympic lifts, kettlebell training in general? All right. Until next time, my friend, stay strong.